going to review finding numbers on a number line. So for this problem, one of the number lines shows the approximate location of the square root of 40. Which one of these number lines is it? So what we need to do is we need to review what we know about number lines. Remember, when you've got a number line, larger numbers go on the right. Smaller numbers go on the left. I think most everybody has that. Sometimes when they might get confused is when we deal with negative numbers. So if I have a number like -8, if I start to draw this number line, numbers on this side of -8 better be bigger than -8. And if I go by ones, what number is bigger than -8? -7. -7 is actually bigger than -8. What number is smaller than -8? -9. -9 is actually smaller. So this is a review of number lines themselves. The other thing we need to review to answer this question is the square root. So in common everyday terms, the square root of a number is 1. You're always going to just write down one of two numbers that are exactly the same, that multiply together to get the original number. So instead of having to write all these directions out every single time, they have a symbol that means find the square root. So this symbol right here is all these words. When you see the symbol, you need to find one number of two that are exactly the same that multiply together to get the original number. For example, are there two numbers that are exactly the same that multiply together to give you 9? I only write down one of them though, because 3 times 3 is 9. So when we have these square root problems, we probably need to know which numbers we can actually take the square root of and which ones we can't. Are there two numbers that are exactly the same that when I multiply them together I get 2? Well, 1 times 2 is 2, but I'm looking for two numbers that are exactly the same that multiply together to give you 2. 1 times 1 is 1. There are no two numbers that multiply together to give you 2 that are exactly the same. So only certain numbers have square roots. So what we're going to do is we're going to make a chart, a list of numbers from 1 to 10, and we're going to generate square root numbers. So we're going to make a list of numbers that you can actually take the square root of it. And what we're going to do is we're going to generate them. We're going to start with 1. 1 times 1 equals 1. So what is the square root of 1? The square root of 1 is equal to 1. I'm going to generate the next square root number. 2 times 2. These two numbers are exactly the same. I multiply them together and I get 4. So 4 is a square. What is the square root of 4? 2. I'm going to keep generating this list. 3 times 3 is 9. 9 is a square number because the square root of 9 is 3. There are two numbers that are exactly the same that multiply together to give you 9, and those two numbers are 3, but you only have to write one of them down. 4 times 4 is 16. 16 is a square. The square root of 16 is 4. You're not writing both of those numbers down, you're just writing one of them down. 5 times 5 is going to create my next number that's a square. That's 25. What is the square root of 25? Square root of 25 is 5. 6 times 6 36. 36 is a square. What is the square root of 36? It's 6, because 6 times 6 gives you 36. 7 times 7. What's 7 times 7? 49. What's the square root of 49? 7. 8 times 8. 64. What's the square root of 64? 8. 9 times 9 is equal to 81. What's the square root of 81? 9. 10 times 10 is 100. What's the square root of 100? 10. So, if I'm looking for some of these other square root numbers, I can tell where it's in between by looking at this chart right here. And this is one way of doing this. So, I've been given this number, the square root of 40. Where would the square root of 40 be? Would it be in between the square root of 1 and the square root of 4? No. The square root of 40 would be in between these two. That means on a number line, it's going to be in between 6 and 7. So I'm looking for the square root of 40. According to my chart, where would the square root of 40 be in between? Hey, it's going to be in between here. So my dot better be in between 6 and 7. So let's look at our choices. This dot is in between 5 and 6. This dot is in between 6 and 7. This dot is in between 4 and 5. And this dot is in between 5 and 6. The only one that has a dot in between 6 and 7 is B. We're going to use this chart to find out where the square root of 12 is. So let's look at our chart. Where is 12 on the list? 12 is in between 9 and 16. So the square root of 12 is going to be in between the square root of 9 and the square root of 16. It's going to be in between these two. That means the dot is going to be in between 3 and 4. So I'll look at my choices. This is in between 3 and 4. This is in between 3 and 4. This one's in between 4 and 5. And this one is almost right on 6. So I know it's not this one. I know it's not this one. I have these two choices. Is 12, according to this, is 12 closer to 16? Is that really close to 16? What square root number do you think would be close to the square root of 16? Probably the square root of 15. What would be close to the square root of 9? Square root of 10. So I would assume that this one would probably be the square root of 15, since it's really close to 4. The square root of 12 is almost right in between these two. And which one is right in between the 3 and the 4? That would be this one right here. So that's how I determine which one of these choices. Yes, this choice was in between 3 and 4 and this one, but this one was really, really close to 4. And what would be really, really close to 4? Something like the square root of 15. Which number line shows the approximate location of the square root of 5? So I look at my charts. The square root of 5 is not in between these two. It would be in between these two. So on a numbered line, it's going to be in between 2 and 3. So let's look at our choices. This is in between 2 and 3. This one's not in between 2 and 3. So it can't be that one. This one's in between 2 and 3. This one's not. So I've got two choices here. I've got a choice that is closer to 3, and I've got a choice that is closer to 2. Which one do you think the square root of 5 is going to be closer to? Is the square root of 5 going to be closer to the square root of 4, which would be 2? Or would the square root of 5 be closer to 9, which is 3? I would think the square root of 5 is going to be closer to the square root of 4, so it should be closer to 2. And which one of these choices is closer to 2? This one right here. This one is closer to 3. So, what is the approximate location of the square root of 18 on a number line? What I'm going to do is I'm going to draw a number line. And I need to find, according to my chart, where the square root of 18 would be. What two numbers is the square root of 18 going to be in between? What two numbers is the square root of 18 going to be in between? So I'll look. Square root of 18 is in between these two. That means the two numbers I need to have on my graph are 4 and 5. So I'm going to put 4 right here, because my smaller numbers go over here, and 5 right here. And so I'm going to put a dot in between 4 and 5. Square root of 18 has to be in between 4 and 5. What is the approximate location of the square root of 60 on a number line? I'm going to draw a number line. I want to have two numbers on the number line. I need to find what these two numbers are. I need to find what two numbers, whole numbers, the square root of 60 is in between. So I'll go down my list. It looks like it's going to be in between these two right here. It's going to be somewhere in between the square root of 49 and the square root of 64. Which one is it going to be closer to? It's going to be closer to 8. These are the two numbers that go on it, and it needs to be a little bit closer to 8. 7 and 8, and I simply put it a little bit closer to 8.